Hey everyone, and welcome back to STR Rev Talk. I'm Jan van Koppernol, CPO at AutoRank and Optimizer. Very excited to kick off today's session. We're going to be diving into a very exciting and challenging moment for STR operators. How do we maximize profits during periods of high demand? And we're going to be focusing on a very big global occasion like the upcoming World Cup soccer in the US, Canada, and Mexico in 2026. To help unpack that and unravel that story, I'm joined by an amazing panel. Rebecca Ballard, revenue management expert at Rev Research. Welcome, Rebecca. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Jeff Lysius, program manager at Guesty, and then also Barchan Leys, founder and CEO of AutoRank and Optimizer. Jeff, Barchan, very nice to have you here as well. And together we're going to be exploring how to make the most of peak demand through smart revenue management strategies. I would propose that we take a couple of seconds to introduce ourselves. Rebecca, do you want to get started?
Sure, yeah. My name is Rebecca Ballard. I am the COO at Rev Research. We're a revenue management consultant firm that has clients all across the world. So we're in a lot of different markets and happy to talk about event pricing. I think it's one of my favorite parts about revenue management, just being that it is one of the more difficult things that we face, but it's fun to figure out the puzzle.
Absolutely. Jeff?
Yeah, great to be here, everyone. I'm Jeff. I'm a program manager at Guesty. I've worked with a lot of our clients on their revenue management, how to maximize their potential, how to make those adjustments, things to look at like the World Cup. In addition to that, I've been based in San Diego. I've been in the vacation rental industry here for 14 years and ran some companies and have my own as well. So I'm doing this constantly, every day with my team internally as well.
Okay. Thank you so much. Barchan?
Yes, nice to meet everyone. So my name is Barchan. I'm the founder of Optimizer and AutoRank, and I'm happy to be on this webinar again.
I would suggest that we get started with a bit of background. So what exactly is that? The FIFA World Cup. It's a recurring event. It happens every 4 years in a different country. And this or the next year, there's going to be a couple of differences compared to the last World Cups. First of all, we're going to see 48 teams, which is the highest ever, compared to 32 teams in the past World Cup. The games are going to be in 16 different cities in 3 different countries: USA, Canada, and Mexico. And all fixtures are going to be decided via draws. And the final draw will be on the 5th of December. Obviously, the 5th of December is going to be a very important date. We're going to know which game will take place in which city, which will eventually impact the strategies. Maybe an opening question to you, Rebecca. Are you looking forward to that 5th of December? Do you have any, are you starting to prepare that date already, or how does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one, we know what the host cities are. So whether, I have rentals directly in those cities or surrounding areas, because we can anticipate a pretty big crowd, and that is seen to kind of spill over into closer cities. So definitely keeping an eye on that, because there is obviously favorited teams. And so if they're, getting our city of choice, then there is that sense of, how that crowd follows. And a lot of people are kind of waiting for that moment to find out where their team is going to schedule their plans. So I do think that that's, just like a concert getting announced when the pre-sale tickets are, it's that same excitement. So for sure, I think it'll be exciting. Selfishly, I hope that some of the ones are closer to me, so possibly get to go, but I think it'll be fun.
Jeff, how are people in the USA looking at this kind of an event?
Yeah, we've been planning for years for this. People are very excited. I'm glad that we don't have to wake up in the middle of the night to watch the draw this time around, which is good. But yeah, I mean, especially being located in San Diego, I've already had, return guests discussed, okay, what do things look like if we stay in San Diego and drive to LA versus staying in LA even. So this is expanding even beyond the host cities.
How are you guys looking at the chances for Team USA?
I was a little bit more confident a couple of years ago. We'll see. At least it's at home. I just hope we can make it to the knockout round. That's my goal.
That would be a good start. What about Belgium?
I will never forget 2 World Cups ago when we beat the USA. So it was one of my happiest days.
Burn.
So definitely looking forward to this event. The past World Cups, to provide a bit of context on how that looked like exactly. 4 years ago, it was in Qatar, 2022, and the situations from the past World Cups are actually not that comparable if we really look at it in depth. So in Qatar is a very small country. All the stadiums and all the playing or all the fixtures happen in one city with a radius of 50 kilometers max. The World Cup before that, Russia 2018, 11 cities, but as we said stated in the introduction, only 32 teams. So this is definitely completely new. It's going to be the first tri-nation World Cup. It's going to be more cities than ever. There's going to be more games than ever, more teams than ever. There's going to be political factors that come into play as well, multiple visa requirements for different countries, multiple currencies. The logistics are going to be fairly complicated. So I think we're looking at an event, and it's very, very hard to predict on the revenue management level, on the property management level, what is going to be the impact of the event. Rebecca and Jeff, we've listed a comparison here with some other events. So we added the Super Bowl. Bachan and I, from our European perspective, the Super Bowl is something that we cannot comprehend that well. Is there a comparison possible with the World Cup?
I don't think so. I think it's kind of you're looking at just two teams, obviously, in one city. I think a lot of people go to the Super Bowl for the social aspect, the parties and things that are surrounding it. So I think it's different. I think a better comparison might be more like the Olympics. And I think that's a lot of what we're going to see for the World Cup is going to give us a preview of the LA Olympics. So I think we're going to be able to take a lot from what we see and maybe some pros and cons, how we can kind of change things and pivot and prepare for the LA Olympics. But my personal opinion, I think it's a big event, but I don't think it's the same. Personally.
Yeah, I would agree with Rebecca. The Super Bowl is almost more of a corporate event here for sponsors and businesses. And it definitely is more of a social event where people are going to go to the parties or the surrounding areas. So I totally agree with this kind of being a test case, a trial run, especially here in Southern California for the Olympics. I think this is a great, time to start looking into kind of what we're going to discuss today and how we can apply this not only to the World Cup, but also the future into the Olympics if you're in Southern California.
One of the most noticeable differences with the Super Bowl is obviously the duration of the event. This is going to be a 6-week event hosted in multiple cities, spread around one continent. So it's going to be, the impact's going to be very difficult to assess. Bachan, we've seen the Paris Olympics quite close to Belgium in last summer. Can we compare that situation?
Even that is hard, because of course you already mentioned the duration, but the Olympics they were happening inside of Paris, so okay, if I'm doing well, I just have to prolong my hotel night or my stay. But the difficulty here at the World Cup is, so from the moment the fixtures are released, you have no clue if your team is progressing to the next round. So maybe your team will progress, and then you have to all of a sudden last minute book a stay. So revenue management for that will be special. But even comparing it to the Olympics, like Yanni, you know this well, we're from Belgium, so everyone thought, okay, Paris Olympics, the rates will be crazy. Everyone raised the rates super crazy. Rates were super high. So what did people do? They just booked surrounding cities. They even booked there was a lot of overflow or spillover to Brussels. So I think it's not comparable, but it is an example of how revenue managers didn't really actualize the demand that an event like this brought.
Yeah. Okay, thanks so much. Very good point. A very good point. We're gonna very quickly dive into some of these cities. I wanted to make an important distinction here between host cities and then transit cities. People are gonna be arriving in different kind of airports, different kind of cities. Maybe they're gonna be staying there for a couple of days before they move to the actual event. So this is definitely gonna be an event with an impact for the entire United States, also for Canada and Mexico, obviously. How can we kind of, let's say that I'm a property manager or a revenue manager in one of these transit cities. How do I even create a strategy for that? How do I do that, Rebecca?
Yeah, I think what you really have to ask yourself is your length of stay. I think that is something that can really make or break a special event pricing strategy. I think in our minds, yes, we want to protect the calendar. Yes, we want, not to sell out too quickly. However, the reality of it is, especially with this event, STRs are always up against hotels. We all on this call can decide why one is different than the other. So that's not it. But from the guest perspective, it is going to come down to how, if they don't, want a shorter length of stay and the STR side isn't allowing for that, they're going to essentially be pushed to a hotel. And so we really have to think about the strategy when you're going up against those with such a high supply or low supply, depending on the area, but a high demand of how do we really go toe to toe with the hotels that have, the ability to fluctuate and pivot very quickly. I think that's where, as the short-term rental, like we kind of miss that in some seasons. So I think really asking yourself, okay, what are those states that are going to be the highest? Is it worth holding a longer length of stay, or is it, dynamically pricing them so that you can essentially create a longer stay by maybe creating the surrounding dates a little bit less, not as high, and go for that higher rate, shorter stay? That's my theory on a lot of event pricing. But I think it's really comes down to length of stay, cancellation policy. All of that is going to become really, really important as these guests are trying to figure out where their team is going. If they get knocked out, do they make it? Do they not? Like, are they going to be traveling to multiple cities? Like, there's a lot of moving pieces here that I love to kind of figure it out. But I think there's a lot to go into it.
Yeah, I can definitely, as you said, Rebecca, it's a fun puzzle as a revenue manager. You have even more dynamic pieces happening here. But to your point, I agree. I think one of the mistakes that the revenue manager can make is just holding to a long minimum length of stay, because guests still don't know, and they will not know how long they want to stay until their team has played the game. So as a revenue manager, the December period will be pivotal whenever the fixtures are released, but also during the World Cup, because if all of a sudden their team is unexpectedly progressing way further into the tournament, that will completely overthrow your strategy.
Yep. But I think the important thing, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to kind of piggyback on top of what you both are mentioning, I think this is something that we can do in Guesty very easily, but there are the options, and Rebecca, you briefly mentioned this, of having different cancellation policies. Now it's going to be different per channel, but we could have a non-refundable cancellation policy on those specific match days, or the day surrounding, the day before and day after, something like that, where we can have a different cancellation policy to ensure that no one's canceling last minute. And then we can have those really flexible, days in between matches or surrounding.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a question, Jeff. You mentioned the potential for a non-refundable strategy. Do you think that guests are actually going to be booking non-refundable rates for an event like that months in advance, where maybe some of the logistics stuff about getting a visa, it's not 100% sure yet? Do you think that's a reasonable strategy?
I think for the group stage, I think so. Once we progress into the knockout stage, probably not, because they can plan ahead of time. They know the matches they're going to be playing, the first 4 matches in the group stage, and they can plan to travel accordingly. So again, I think it needs to be done with some delicacy. We're not going to have a 4-day non-refundable period, but maybe on match day and a day before or a day after makes sense.
But in hotel event pricing, revenue managers are often using tactics. They're tracking flights, they're doing those kind of things. Is that a reasonable strategy for STR operators as well? And then especially in these kind of transit cities, to track when people are going to be arriving, when they're going to be leaving to the city where the game's actually played?
It will give an indication, but I believe it will not be as strong as, for example, we have seen in Brazil, because the United States and just because of the size of the different countries as well, there will be much more driven travel, where people just drive through different occasions. Of course, if they play or Mexico or Canada, that will give an indication, but it will not be one-on-one like hotels are used to, like for the Olympics, where they're used to, they know, okay, if we see an increase in travelers to Paris, that's because of the Olympics. So it will give an indication, but it's not a make or break.
Yeah.
Moving to the next couple of slides, so we're gonna use Miami as an example to kind of base a hypothetical revenue management strategy on. So I'm gonna very quickly walk through a market overview of Miami for those who are not aware yet. What does the Miami market look like? The summer has been quite difficult for many properties in Miami, so we're going to be looking at occupancy and RevPAR from a price labs market dashboard. So low season in Miami is approximately between April and November, but with August and September being the 2 worst months. You can see this pretty well on a rental revenue graph here. You can also see that revenue has declined. September has been very difficult. We're not going to zoom into that, but market conditions are tricky in Miami right now. You can also see that in the RevPAR here. And in the ADR graph as well. So obviously in these kind of markets, I really like to look at the difference in ADRs between high and low seasons. For me, that's an indication of an active revenue management strategy in a market. How many people do we really see working on those rates to try and drive occupancy in the slow season as well? The occupancies here, estimated occupancies, obviously the World Cup is right into slow season. I think that's also very special situations. Usually events would occur in high season, closer to high season. It's quite rare to have such a big event in low season as well. In low season, we usually see shorter booking windows, which is also going to be completely different during this event. And this is a very nice graph looking at future prices right now. So different revenue managers are obviously pushing rates up high in the future. We can also see that currently there's a lot of uncertainty in the market. the gap between different percentiles is very, very high. These rates are higher than some of the usual events in Miami. I think I can see the Formula One race, the Ultra Festival, and then New Year's Eve on this graph. Rebecca, if you see this kind of a graph on future prices, how do you interpret that? All that uncertainty.
I think it's people getting nervous. I think it's nobody wants to leave money on the table. They know that, especially for their homeowners are expecting high dollar, and because they don't know what teams are going to come, they don't exactly know what. So it's like, let's just, we see this a lot where they just take that far out pricing and just turn that dial up almost too much. To kind of in their mind protect the calendar. I think there's just such a fine line between being overly priced and maximizing, and so there is just that line where you have to really be cautious and think through that. I think you can pull more proper pricing from past events, like you said, the Formula One, kind of looking at that. What does that look like? Obviously there's going to be more demand higher, but at least that gives you a starting point. I think sometimes property managers feel like they're kind of shooting in the dark when something like this comes, especially, take Miami has bigger events, but if you have different areas of the country that doesn't see some event like this, they're kind of just guessing. And sometimes we can guess way too high or way too low and we sell out too fast. So there is a lot to kind of look at the data from all different angles. And I think it is also, segmenting your portfolio. It's not a one size fits all. It's not a rate that goes across the board. It is really you have to take a surgical approach to really succeed, is my opinion.
But John, if you're creating a revenue management strategy for an event like this, future prices on the market level, is that something that you take into account at all? Are you looking at your own metrics, your own historical pacing, you just deciding on your own rates versus past events? Or how do you look at this kind of market data?
Well, how I'm looking at this is and it has been mentioned before, is the variances here are quite crazy. It clearly shows that the market, is still in the dark of what to do. So I wouldn't compare it to any other events, because if you're lucky and a certain, let's say, European team progresses to the next stage, okay, you're going to make a lot of revenue. But if you're unlucky and, let's say, a team like Uzbekistan is progressing to the next stage, they will have a lower likelihood of sending a lot of fans. So I think this is also shown here. So there is no historical data here to compare. There's no other event. It's playing the puzzle right and making sure that you don't jeopardize yourself with your minimum length of stay, but it's also being reactive enough. So as a revenue manager, you will have to become a soccer fan during June of next year, because those tiny details happen. And it's not only about rates, but it's making sure, let's say, a country like the Netherlands, if they would progress to the next round, they are known for their crazy fans, always come with a lot of people. They're also a country with a high GDP per capita, so they have the capacities to spend on travel. They have the capacity to travel. They have the capacity to make long trips, and they probably will, knowing the Dutch. So if you're lucky and the Dutch progress to a certain city, okay, then you have to react very closely. But again, if a country like Uzbekistan or a country with lower GDP per capita is progressing, you will feel it. But this also tunes back to distribution. If the Netherlands is progressing, then Booking.com will be your key driver in getting those bookings in. If other countries are, Airbnb or VRBO might become more dominant. So as a revenue manager, looking at historical data for this event will be hard.
Yeah.
Can we conclude from this pricing graph that no one actually knows what's coming?
100%.
Yes. I think that's the joy of being a revenue manager. Do we really, we can draw conclusions, but I mean, we've learned over the last few years that things can go sideways real fast and they can go up real fast. So it's always kind of, moving.
Yeah, I think this is a great reminder that you need to keep your eyes on what's going on. This needs to be under review. The closer and closer we get to even just past the draw, right, and how things progress, you need to keep an eye on this. We can hold rates high, but they need to be adjusted. We need to be flexible. We need to constantly be updating this.
Exactly. And I think the flip side of it is you have an excuse to watch all the games.
If we dive into the forward-looking occupancy at this point, it's obviously very, very early to draw any conclusions. But I would say that we're seeing a small uptick, especially in basic compared to last year. So people are definitely already making their bookings. Let's say that you've set a strategy for your portfolio. You're constantly checking in on that strategy. You're reevaluating cancellation policies, but other distribution related aspects on a weekly basis, for example. This occupancy graph, do we expect a huge bump all of a sudden on December 5th, or how are you guys looking at that release date? Is that going to be super important? Is that going to be of minor importance? What do you guys think?
For me personally, we already know the schedule for the groups, well, for all the matches, so we can plan ahead, but it is going to be then adjusting, as Barjan mentioned. Okay, who's playing where? Especially beyond the group stage. So we can prepare those date ranges, and I think we will see people just book, start just filling in gaps, especially, again, if we have a really flexible cancellation policy for those match dates. Someone could just book a bunch of different cities and then they can cancel once they know where their team's playing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Barjan, what are the kind of levers that you're looking into on a weekly basis?
I can agree more to what Jeff said. Of course, you guys know already where you're going to play, but for a lot of countries, they will only know it in December. So the group stage will be one event, and then everything happening after the group stage for a revenue manager will be a second event. So fans will start booking from the moment they know which city to go to. First, they will book their stay, and then maybe their flights, or vice versa. But prices will rise from the moment. Or prices should rise from the moment the fixtures are released. And it's important to treat the group stage and everything coming after the group stage as two separate events, because they are two separate events. One is guaranteed demand and the other is predicted demand, but predicted based on a soccer game.
So you guys looking into all the different teams and the amount of fans that they brought in to similar to previous World Cups, or how are you guys actually assessing that towards that, so beyond the group stage?
I mean, I think that's important. I think for me personally, I'm looking at more like geographically, like where are my properties in closeness to the events. That I think is, what is the competition? Is there a lot of hotels around? Are there, is there easy public transport? Is this an Uber? Is this a rent a car sort of thing? Are my my walking destination places being priced higher than the ones a little bit of an outskirt? I mean, when you say Miami, that's a pretty big city with a lot of options. And if you are the property manager in Miami, you know which units are closest to the events center, but the guests don't. They're just searching Miami. So I think in this time right now is really a good time to look at your listing descriptions, putting in, I don't say you have to change the whole entire thing, but if you are within walking distance of the event center or the match, putting that, using that valuable resources like your headline, your description, because people are looking. We know that people are getting savvier. They're using ChatGPT to get search results. I think that's where I'm looking at it more from a guest perspective of like, how do I position myself right now? Because I don't think it's a if they're going to come, it's a how do we get them to pick me sort of thing. I think that we're going to see the compression. I would be shocked if we didn't. You know, yes, there's political climates and different things, but people are going to come to this event. It's just how do I get picked first and how do I get picked at the highest rate, I think is the biggest thing for property managers right now. It's not a if, it's a when.
Yeah,
And if you want to hold out.
I can agree more, especially you're at the moment when the fixtures are released. It's about, you hope that your guests or that the potential guests pick you, and for that, of course, optimized listings are important, but also just what the guest wants is they want to stay and they just want a certain proximity to the stadium. Maybe, you know, they are taking a car trip around different cities, or maybe they're a classic European that wants to walk everything and nags when it's not walkable. So for that, it's important to get the expectations and what the guests really want, put it in your listing to get your listing to be dynamically updated from group stage to the further fixtures.
Yeah, totally agree. And just real quickly, you know, it's also about, okay, how are we going to optimize what are we going to put in our listing? What are we going to put in that property to make it more group friendly or World Cup friendly? Are we going to have coolers? Do we have grills, right? We want to use AutoRank to help optimize our property, but we also need to add those amenities or things that can really maybe set us apart.
And I think it's how do you optimize the whole stay? So it's not just about rent. Like, what are we take a deeper look at our fees? What are we doing for upsells? What are we doing for early check-in, late checkout? You know, there's so much more than just that nightly revenue with these big events like this that people are willing, because they want the experience, they want to pay that. And so I think we have there's lots of layers here, and this is why I love the event side of stuff, because I think it's just you just get that rush of like, oh, how can we do this? Now, I've also been on the other side where you're like, oh man, we just got rocked. Like we did not do that well. You know, but I think when you see that and just what we've learned from different events throughout the, you know, not just the United States, but throughout the world, you can really maximize not just your nightly rate. There's way more opportunity there that I don't think we tap into enough.
Yeah, upsells and concierge services could be huge during these events, during the World Cup. There's a lot of different ways to generate revenue here.
Yeah.
Is this the kind of event where you have to be extremely worried if you've missed the train and if the booking window has passed and if you feel like your competition is sold out already and then you've just missed out on all of that? Or do you continuously keep optimizing and keep checking in on all the different levels that you can pull?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of strategies here, as Farjan keeps mentioning. There's two events. There's the group and the knockout stage. So I think, yeah, there are some scenarios where we could try to hold higher prices last minute for those. The later and later we get into the group stages to see who's going to play, right? So, yeah, I mean, I'd be checking this constantly, and just like we mentioned, separating it into two different events.
Yeah, but to your point, Jarne, I believe it is. If you miss the opportunity for group stage, then you will be screwed, because tickets will sell in no time. And then maybe people will resell tickets and some additional travel will be. But the biggest bunch will be happening during December. And if you miss that, then you're screwed. But I think an additional factor, something, for example, that we also saw at the Paris Olympics, is that people with just a spare room, they will also start advertising, because everyone in the whole world knows this is a global event. So there will be not only increased demand, but also people will just start selling their spare room, because some travelers are just looking for a night to stay. And then it doesn't matter how nice your property is, but maybe the proximity to the stadium and a shitty bedroom will account for a certain ADR. So it's also important to know that your supply will be as unpredictable as your demand, to make it even more complex.
Mm-hmm.
So to summarize, a lot of uncertainty definitely surrounding this event, but it's going to be a very exciting one. I think we're all looking forward to December 6th. Yeah, how the fixtures are going to look like. Looking at a couple of cities. So these are, this is very, very old data from June 2nd already. But even then, in some cities, we already saw some additional demand. So obviously, that additional demand, it's going to depend on where are the games at, which kind of fixtures is this happening. So as a revenue manager, as a property manager, be sure to kind of map this out virtually for your properties and see where those games will be played at and which properties to look at mainly. This is some data. These are hotel prices increases from during major events compared to the same period last year. Last time in the FIFA World Cup in Moscow and in Johannesburg, we saw huge increases in ADR. The projected rates for LA are also mentioned here. Obviously, the sizes or the magnitude of that increase is completely different to it being hosted in more cities than the previous kind of World Cups. Can we still do something with this data? Is this ADR data on past events? Is that useful to take it into account, or is this so different at this point?
I think in the US, it's going to be really different personally. So many different markets, so many different sizes. North America, I mean, Canada to Mexico to the US, all across North America, all these cities are so completely unique. You go from LA to Guadalajara, it's just going to be night and day different in the market.
And I think you have to, that's also really hard because, again, like Jeff was just saying, like different cities, but we also have a wide variety of inventory. So you're going to have, studio 1-bedroom apartments in, close city center to larger homes that sleep 20, so it's going to be really tough to kind of quantify that, because I think you're going to see, booking windows traditionally are always vastly different based on the size of the property. So I think we're going to see that even with the ADR, maybe it is a group that follows the team and they're, sharing a 6-bedroom home or something like that, or it's that fan that just, bops around and they're okay with staying in a little studio apartment, because the hotel was sold out. So I think it's going to be, it's going to be interesting to kind of see how it all plays out, to be honest.
Yep. I think what this shows to me is that we are certain of demand. We're certain it will bring a lot of demand. But for example, if you compare to World Cup 2010, which will be already 16 years ago, there was, the fixtures were more located around the same area. So planes were not always necessary. People could use cars. While right now it's, across 3 countries, across a lot of different states. So this data shows me it's going to be crazy demand, but more localized demand instead of, just the whole country of benefit.
In the next graph, we're going to be looking at some travel behavior during the World Cup. This is very preliminary data from Booking.com. We're going to be looking at some of the countries, some of the top bookers for the World Cup in the last 30 days, and their average length of stay as well. Rebecca, so you mentioned that length of stay was going to be a very important part of that strategy. What's going to be yours?
Yeah, I mean, I think length of stay is really important because we also have to think about what that length of stay does for your searchability. So if you have a guest who's on, an international guest who's on booking.com that's searching, 2 nights, but you have a 7-night minimum, there's not a little pop-up that comes up on booking.com that says, hey, you'll get more options if you search 2 nights, or search a different night. It doesn't work like that, or increase your search is what I'm trying to say. Sorry. So I think that's the part that we have to think about, is that even lowering that length of stay doesn't necessarily mean that's the number of nights you're going to get booked. I think if personally, I'm a bigger fan of lower length of stay, higher ADR. I think it wins most of the time. And I can get creative with selling those gaps with gap management and just different things, extending stays. I think that's, in my personal opinion, it's also easier to explain to owners, because we don't know how long some of these teams are going to stay in the tournament. They might get knocked out. So people may be more apt to extend than actually book a longer stay. So personally, that's just my thought process on the whole thing, and I've done that with other events, and it's worked out really well. It's kind of that volume game, like how do I get the most in the shortest amount of stay.
I agree. According to what we see and what I strongly believe is, as you said, Rebecca, the best strategy is a shorter length of stay and a higher ADR, not only from a revenue perspective, but also if you think of distribution, you send more availability to things like Airbnb, like Booking.com, like VRBO. You give them more options to rank you. You give them more options to index you, meaning that your overall trend will be better, because they know, okay, this is a property that can be sold on multiple equations, multiple combinations, and that's exactly what they want. And in these scenarios, guests just want to stay, and of course they will look at price, but they just want to see their team play. They are not there to enjoy the city. They are there to hope to see their team win. So I agree, but maybe Janne, if I'm looking at the data here, what's interesting to me is seeing that Argentina and Brazil, for example, those two have been qualified recently for the World Cup. So it's amazing to see that they already start booking. So also that for a revenue manager, and this proves to me that it doesn't start in December, but it starts already now at looking at who will be qualifying.
Okay, thank you so much, guys. So for the last piece of this presentation, we're going to be diving into a key insights report from Guesty. Jeff, I'm going to be giving the floor to you.
Yeah, so just kind of what we were talking about, these top factors that we've seen in Guesty that drive occupancy to our clients. You can see it highlighted here. Listing on more channels, exactly what we're talking about. Visibility is key. Being able to diversify your portfolio across multiple channels, and especially here, if you're in the US, maybe you haven't used Booking.com as much. We do have some metrics showing, just in general, Booking.com has spent a lot more money marketing as a short-term rental OTA in the US. We're seeing that translate in Guesty. More and more users are adopting, especially as they've released their payments by Booking.com. So you no longer have to be the merchant of record. So as we talk about the World Cup and in Miami and all the markets here in North America where it's going to be coming, it will be important to diversify those channels, and especially to be on Booking.com for those travelers coming from different places in Europe. And that's kind of what we're seeing lay out throughout the course of the last year in Guesty, and moving forward, that will be really important. Of how do we get on more channels? How do we gain more visibility? How do we have more access to travelers?
That's interesting. Yeah.
The next slide, just talking about AI use cases, with right in line with AutoRank here, and really what we're looking at, the second bar there, the listing descriptions. So we touched on this briefly, but what we can do is we can have different platforms, and in Guesty especially, we can have different descriptions. We can have different titles for those OTA channels. So I could have an Airbnb is only going to allow me 50 characters, but on Booking.com, where we might see that influx of European travelers, we can have a length of keywords that really kind of underscores what our property is all about. And that's where, you know, AutoRank can come into play and optimize that and link in that title versus shrinking it on Airbnb. So the listing descriptions is something that I really touch home on all the clients I meet with within Guesty when we work on the revenue management. Is we need the keywords, we need the titles, we need the photos, we need the description. What is in there? Make it easy, make it accessible, and using something like AutoRank can definitely help. And we're just kind of see that play out through Guesty as well.
Thank you so much for everyone's presence here. Really enjoyed the chat. So the World Cup's going to be a super exciting event. No one really knows what's going to be happening. This is the first event of its kind on such a large scale. Follow up on your strategy on maybe even more than a weekly basis. It's going to be extremely important.
Maybe
of course,
if I may tap in, I'm very curious, Jeff and Rebecca and Janne, who do you think is going to win? And we have to rewatch this in a year, and then we can say we said it.
Well, I've got Spain and Brazil in the finals, and Brazil winning it in the US. Well, in North America against they won in '94, so that's who I've got.
Who do I want to win, or who do I think?
If you had to put your money on it.
Well, I do follow Team Italy, and so that is new coach, you know, some possibilities. The dark horse. Do I think so? Probably not. But my heart says I hope that they do. You know, so that's my preference. But I think I'm excited. I think it'll be good. I think that anytime there's some competitive sports, I'm not playing it. I'm definitely watching it. So I think there's some good things. So
what do you think, Marcel?
I think the last dance of Messi. He will lift the World Cup with Argentina.
It would be a beautiful story.
That would be made in the US, last dance of Messi. That would be written in the stars. What do you think, Janne?
I think France is going to have a very strong team. I would obviously hope see Belgium take it home, but unfortunately, I'm afraid we don't have the team this year. We really missed our opportunity in 2018. But I do think the French have a very strong team. I'm still salty about our loss in the 2018 World Cup, so I don't want them to win. Me too. I never want to think about that day again. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, guys. This was STR Rev Talk, and see you next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.